What would you rather? Dominate the infernal hordes. Speedrun tier 130s in about 5 minutes. Be able to blow up enemies with 20 billion poison ticks. Or would you rather just be completely immortal, face-tanking everything imaginable? Well, shit, why not do all of them then and have a fuck ton of fun doing it? Because that's exactly what this build is. A fuck ton of fun. You're running 0 cooldowns, being able to pull in enemies, shadow step from enemy to enemy, and just blow shit up. On top of that, the build is unkillable despite running full dex gems in the armor because we have just that much damage reduction and barriers. Hell yeah, bud. I reckon you're sold on this by now, and if not, well, suck a dick then. Let's talk about how the build works then, shall we? Because I have a few different versions that we'll talk about. First one is the one you're currently looking at. It has a buttload of damage and survivability. Then there's of course the dogshit newbie version. The full DPS version has an additional glyph and focuses only on damage, in case you're into taking cool screenshots for a thumbnail or whatever. And of course, the T8 Ether Maximizer. This version easily grants you over 1k Ether per run, if your computer can handle it, and utilizes the Shroud of Kanduras. Unfortunately, my computer is too shit to handle this, as you may see, and I'm pretty much forced to play the standard version LOL. Sad times. There's even a version in here where you're actually immortal, having permanent immunity simply by slotting Dark Shroud onto your bars that some Chinese dude came up with, and you can use this to keep pulling enemies in if you want to pit push. Now, I don't expect that version to remain for too long, seeing that immortality is a bullshit tech. But I'll explain it later in case you want to abuse it. Starting us off with the standard edition, let's see how that one works first. First off, this is an andariel's build in its entirety and proccing the lucky hits via puncture. This means that all we do is to maximize the andariel poison nova damage in this build, along with gaining as many novas as possible. To do this, we of course use generic multipliers and a buttload of lucky hit, but unlike other puncture Andy builds, we are doing a lot differently. For starters, Shard of Varathiel. What this allows is to generate a buttload of barriers, and in turn, near immortality. On top of that though, we're also able to slot in Starless Skies for a buttload of lucky hit and damage, along with the conceited aspect. All in all, a massive upgrade. This thing also helps us sort out the attack speed caps, despite being a sword. Now, while this does allow us to spend energy, it's not what's resetting our cooldowns this fast via preparation. Because we are indeed using preparation, but we're resetting our cooldowns via exposure instead. Not only does this allow a permanent uptime on the No Witness legendary node, but it's also a massive quality of life passive. And why is that? Well, damn, because we never have to think about setting up stagger combos on our enemies ever again. Normally, we need to think about all of our cooldowns and when they come off so we can pump damage when the boss gets staggered. But now, we can just reset all that shit and drop them whenever we feel like it. So basically, an andariel's rogue build for dummies. Interestingly enough, we're not really losing any damage doing this either. On average, our damage increases, seeing that we can keep up all of our multipliers permanently. And the only thing we're actually losing is the close quarters key passive, which is mid at best. When it comes to the skills, we first have Shadow Step. This allows us to gain permanent unstoppable, since we can reset our cooldowns at will. And it also allows for a buttload of mobility, of course. When it comes to all the other skills, they're merely there to buff our damage. Poison Trap brings 15% damage, knocks enemies down so we can use Malice, and it's also used in the key passive. Caltrops is mainly used for bossing, and Smoke Grenade we drop on our enemies' sorry asses with ease for a lovely multiplier. Death Trap is where it's all about though, seeing as they pull enemies in, along with slapping on some lovely multipliers for us from the Perragons. And why puncture? Well, shit, for a buttload of reasons. It's fast for starters, and it allows us to rock a sword and dagger for ultimate speed. Running 2 daggers is optimal, but it's indeed possible to gain the same attack speed rocking enough attack speed. It also has a high lucky hit, and it shoots out 6 daggers each cast. This grants it one of the highest average lucky hit outputs, if not the highest on the market currently. Oh, and it also sorts vulnerable, at least in the standard version, so there's that. Well, damn son, that's a bit of the basics and skills. To fully appreciate the build though, let's head on over to the gear and aspects. Starting us off, the only item you actually need is the andariels. The masterworking prio, though, depends entirely on your gear and if you actually give a shit about maxing out your gear. Because there are 2 attack speed caps in the game, which is annoying as hell. But in the description, you'll find a calculator. You then simply fill in the boxes, and ideally, you would get to 10 frames here for maximum damage, but 11 is fine as well. Drop by the Perragons Discord if you need any advice on this. Next up is the chest. Check out this bad boy. If you don't have it, then you're going to slap on the aspect of might instead, and if you're rocking the Horde version, then Shroud of Conduras will be mandatory. For Tyraels, you want to masterwork the damage reduction. It's then time for the Fate Feisters, and here, the most important stats are lucky hit and the crowd control. And why is the crowd control important? Well, damn, my man, because it works with creeping death. The more different crowd controls, the better. This is also the reason you'll do more damage on elites than bosses. After that, you want a pair of pantaloonies as to not get cancelled. Second Wind is the godliest passive in the game, allowing us to double our health with ease using a barrier. Just lovely. In the standard edition, you'll then imprint the Umbrous aspect to gain Dark Shroud, seeing that it's roughly 50% damage reduction. I'd say it's a pretty solid aspect. For the Immortal version, though, this aspect will be useless, seeing that you're actually pressing the Dark Shroud button. But more on that later. Next, we want a slick pair of sneakers. Nikes are ideal, but these will do. This is also where you'll grab the armor roll and slap on the noxious ice aspect for big hecking damage. Alright, and then some actual interesting stuff. The weapons. You want 100% chance to cast the punctures twice. That's massively important. For second prio, Dark Shroud damage is just godly, allowing you to pump out thousands of additive damage with ease. Next important thing is the creeping death aspect, seeing that it's by far the strongest aspect for us, and some lovely ultimate skill damage gems which we'll utilize in the Perragons later. For the other weapons, we are grabbing the Shard of Varathiel and Masterwork the basic attack skill speed, which is in the second attack speed cap by the way, and slap on the Bursting Venoms aspect. This thing may look like shit, which I can agree with at a first glance, but it's actually godly since it can in itself proc lucky hits and andariel novas. The difference with this is actually substantial, so don't sleep on it. You do, however, need to use poison imbuement, but that's sorted via pestilent points. For the rest of the jewelry, you grab Starless Skies if you have it, and then slap on the conceited aspect on the amulet. Now this amulet is alright, as Frigid Finesse is the strongest passive, but I'd much rather have alchemical advantage along with either exploit or unstable elixir here. Unfortunately, though, I'm too fucking broke to be buying gold, and I'm not a streamer, so I'll have to settle with this for now. But a godly amulet can definitely double your damage. Well shit, that's the gear and aspects. And specialization? Well, you should know by now that preparation is the name of the game, resetting all of our cooldowns and granting 15% damage reduction with ease. Well, damn, my man or woman, you still here? Nicely done. Let's talk some tips and shit and talk about the different build variations for a bit. First off are the resource management. If you have the Starless Skies, then you want to temper innovation ranks. This will solve out any resource problems you may have. If you don't have Starless, however, then you have two options. Either you run the Starlight aspect and call it a day, or you run Cold Clip along with the Beastfall boots. This is currently bugged and grants infinite energy. It's up to you what you prefer. Both options are a DPS loss over Starless though. Next, I just want to show off how the Immortal version works. To gain the immunity from Shroud of Konduras, you need to actually press Dark Shroud, meaning you'll need it on your skill bar. The problem with this, though, is that the cooldown doesn't start until the immunity is off. But seeing that we can just reset Dark Shroud instantly via Death Trap, that shit is solved as well. And then again, seeing that we can reset Death Trap instantly via Exposure, you now have everything you need for immortality. It's a bit of a bullshit tech, but it works. And if you want to do the tech, where you just keep pulling enemies in when running around in high pits or whatever, all you need is to combine this with ranks in rapid gambits. Because if you have this, then you can just keep evading and use the immunity for unstoppable, and you'll pull in the entire dungeon all. Alright, so that's the tips for today. And just in time, seeing that it's already skill tree of fucking clock, and you know it, baby. We start with puncture, along with enhanced and fundamental puncture for both vulnerable and more lucky hits, because more punctures equals more chances to gain lucky hits. Should make sense, I hope. We then go to sturdy and fuck off from there as fast as possible, seeing that we don't want any core skills. It's then time for shadow step for unstoppable, and as we can just keep resetting our cooldowns, we will also be able to keep up the 20% damage reduction here. We have a few lame passives, and of course enhanced caltrops for nuking down bosses. After that, we want our Dark Shrouds for the damage reduction, Smoke Grenade for damage, and Poison Trap for both increased damage and knockdowns. This is lovely, allowing us to benefit from Malice as well. Next, we pick up every poison passive we can find. Alchemical Advantage would have been great on the amulet too, but hey, I'm not made of gold. Frigid Finesse is pretty much mandatory to have though, seeing that one rank is 10% damage, absolutely disgustingly broken. After that, it's time for the ultimates. Innovation keeps energy up in this setup, and Second Wind is what keeps us alive. We also have Death Trap here, along with enhanced Death Trap for the pull-in. And finally, the key passive. Seeing that we have a buttload of lucky hit, we can easily reset our trap cooldowns when attacking enemies that are affected by traps in some way. This can be done via 3 ways: the Poison Trap, the Death Trap, or Caltrops. So whichever one of those traps you use, just attack the enemies affected by them and you'll reset your cooldowns. Shit, son. Skill tree complete. What do you say about checking out the Perragons? Hell yeah. Just don't forget to sub first, or else I'll fucking lose it. Here we start by picking up Control, seeing it's the biggest glyph multiplier. We then head on over to Cheap Shot, which we utilize for the Big Dam, and we also grab some damage reduction here. Fluidity is just great, boosting both damage and damage reduction with ease. We then go to pick up Tracker, which is just a massive damage multiplier for our poisons. This board may look weird, but it's done on purpose because we want to grab every ultimate skill damage node we can for the No Witness Legendary node. This one is the highest scaling node for us rogues and is just lovely. Down here we also have Eldritch Bounty, which we'll grab last. This is triggered via the Pestilent Points aspect I showed earlier. After that, we go for Exploit Weakness and Socket Canny for a bit of additional damage. And finally, Deadly Ambush. This is bugged and also works on non-crits, making it massive for us, especially seeing that we'll always keep enemies in our traps. We also have Bane here, a lovely poison multiplier. Now what you need to know is that on most boards, I've been grabbing as much max life and damage reduction as possible. So we're rocking 5 glyphs and legendary nodes, along with a buttload of defensive nodes and ultimate damage. It is indeed possible to grab an additional glyph, which is in the DPS setup, but you'll get pounded for sure. Works with the immortal setup though, but it's up to you if you want to use it. I'm also mentioning that I'm using exploit instead of canny in the T8 horde setup, as it's just way easier to gain vulnerable that way. Alright, so that's the Perragons. I think we're finally ready to get hecking good now. Damn right. While it may be difficult to see, there is a slight delay whenever you pop a poison trap or death trap, meaning your DPS goes up slightly if you manage to just spam out punctures. So what you'll then do is mainly focus on keeping your no witness node up, along with using death trap to pull in enemies. When you've pulled them in, press every button in the game to gain all those lovely multipliers from all of your skills. When those are up though, you're mainly just spamming punctures and making sure that they're still up. When it comes to bossing, all you need to worry about is keeping caltrops up on the boss. If you manage to do this, then you've got yourself a 1.45 multiplier with ease. You'll then just keep pounding the boss until he's staggered and blow him up. For the hordes, you typically need 2 staggers, mainly due to poison taking a bit of time to build up. But with great gear, you could pump them down in 1 stagger probably. Now onto the Shroud of Kandura's variant. We already talked about the Immortal one a bit, but I'm not really playing that one as it's a bit annoying and not fun. Instead, this is what I'm doing if I want to pump out ether. First thing, I'll close all open tabs and shut down all the processes on my computer, or else it'll fucking explode. After that, I'm just pressing Death Trap and Poison Trap on cooldown while Shadow stepping onto enemies far away and evading. Every time you evade, you'll pull enemies in, which you can blow by spamming punctures on them. After pulling them in, you'll also drop a smoke grenade on them to make sure the damage multiplier is up. And now, my friends, you are experts on this build. Nicely done. Hope you'll enjoy it as much as I have, and I'll see you in the next one.